Welcome to the PHP Essential Training Series. I am Mike King, your host, and in this tutorial we'll be talking about operators inside PHP. And my guess is we're going to actually have multi-parts to this tutorial series, this portion of the tutorial series, because there are a lot of operators in PHP and we really need to understand how they work with our values and our variables so that we can get the most out of the programming language. So what exactly is an operator in PHP? Operators are used to manipulate or perform operations on variables and values in our programming language. Operators are symbols that tell the PHP processor to perform actions on the value of a variable. As an example, the addition operator, which is the plus sign, is an operator that tells PHP to add the values together. As another example, the greater than symbol in PHP tells the processor to compare the two values. And you're going to see plenty of demonstrations of these when we get into the lab in a moment. So let's look at a list of some of the operators that we'll be using in PHP. So first we have the addition operator, which is the plus sign. And what it does, it takes two values and sums them together. Then we have the subtraction operator, which is the minus sign. And it's the difference between two values. The multiplication sign is that star symbol. Usually it's the Shift 8 on your keyboard, and it's the product of two values. The division is the /. Usually it's right below your question mark key on your keyboard, and it's the quotient of two values. And then the modulus operator, which a lot of people probably haven't seen before, that's the percentage sign, and it's the remainder of two values. So if I take two values and I divide them, whatever the remainder is the modulus of that particular value. In other words, if I had 3 divided by 3, my modulus would be 0. If I had 4 divided by 3, my modulus would be 1. So let's move into our development environment and we'll demonstrate some of these operators inside of PHP. Alright, so let's drop out of our presentation and get into our development environment. First thing I want to do, let's confirm that we've got our Apache server up and running. Since we will be using PHP, obviously the server has to be up in order to process the code. I'm going to load Sublime Text 3, and Chrome will be the browser I'll be using for this demonstration. I am in my local host. I'm actually in the directory called Operators inside my local host. This is where we'll be doing the demonstrations for these particular tutorials. I'm going to go ahead and load up my template.php and do a save as. I want to go ahead and save this as operator_1.php. Operators-_1.php. And my guess is we're going to have quite a few of these files, so I want to go ahead and separate them so that if you have access to the exercise files, you will be able to watch how we progress through these. I'm just going to go ahead and change my title to operators. I'm going to give myself inside this container div an H3. And my H3 is simply going to state operators in PHP. And that's simply going to state that if I can learn to spell. I have no earthly idea how that happened. Too much coffee. Anyway, go ahead and save those changes. Let's refresh the browser to make sure we're in the correct file. Operators_1.php, and we are. Excellent. Okay, so the first thing I want to do, let's go ahead and demonstrate the operators we just looked at inside of our presentation. And we looked at the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and modulus. So let's get a handle and understand how those work before we move on to anything more difficult. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up my PHP tags. And we know that in order to get any PHP inside of our browser, we have to have those tags open. And the PHP goes in between those tags. And I'm going to go ahead and use an echo statement. First, let me assign a couple of variables. That'll make it easier for us. Let's use variables to signify this. I'm going to have variable x. Let's make that guy equal to 12. And then I'm going to have another variable. Let's have a variable y. And we'll make him equal to 6. And then I'm going to come down. The first thing I want to do is let's look at that multiplication or the addition operator. So let's do an echo because we want this to appear on our screen. And inside these parentheses, I want to do, let's take x and add it to y. And based on what we know, and we have to obviously end this with a semicolon, based on what we know about addition and the value of our variables, our output should be 18. if that is correct. If we know how to do our math, I'm just going to go ahead and put this note there. So let's go ahead and save that. Refresh our browser window, and we've got 18. Perfect. So that worked out rather well. So then I'm just going to go down here. Let's say echo one more time, and I'm going to echo a break tag. And the only reason I'm doing this is just so we have a line, and because that is text, actually that has to be in quotation marks, just so we have a break between our two, or between our examples. So we know that the addition tag adds those two values together, and it worked. Very good. Now let's look at the next one. And I believe the next one we covered was the subtraction. All right, so let's echo, again, inside of our parentheses, let's take 6 and subtract 12 from it. That ought to throw it a curveball, right? So let's take y and subtract 12. And that with a quotation mark, or with, I'm sorry, with semicolon. And again, output based on what we know about math. If I'm not mistaken, that should be -6. If I'm not mistaken, let's go ahead and save that change. Refresh our browser window. -6. Working out just as we had planned. And now I'm just going to go ahead and copy this so you don't need to keep Control-C to copy, by the way. Command-V on the Mac, Control-C on the PC. And then to paste, Control-V on the PC, Command-V on the Mac. Now I'm going to go ahead, and the next one we looked at was our multiplication. So let's go ahead and take y and multiply it by 12. And the only thing we should have to do there is we actually should have to put the multiplication symbol because everything's already there. And if I remember back from my school days, that should be equal to 72. From back in my old days in school. Go ahead and save those changes, refresh our browser window, and we've got a 72. Perfect. The next one that we looked at the division. And again, all we should have to do is change the division sign here. And if I take 6, and actually what I want to do now is I want to actually take 12. So I take 12 and I divide it by 6. Based on my old days in school, that should be 2. And I only say that because when I was in school, we were using stone tablets to write this stuff down. Just kidding. And then the last one we did was modulus. And we don't have a remainder here, so I'm actually going to bring in another variable. Let's go ahead and take 12. And I want to divide 12 by, I'm going to put in another variable here. Let's put in a variable of z because I want a remainder so you can see how this works. We'll actually do it both ways because modulus is probably the only one you're not really familiar with. Let's do a value of 7 for z. So I want to take x and I want to divide it by z. I want the modulus. So I want to take 12 divided by z and give me the modulus. So if that's working as expected, that should give us a modulus of 5. Go ahead and save the change, refresh our browser window, and you'll see that we've got the modulus of 5. Now if I were to divide 12 by y, because we'll have a remainder of 0, the modulus will be 0 because we don't have any remainders left over. So I want you to understand modulus because modulus actually comes in quite handy as we work through a lot of the exercises inside program. We actually use modulus a lot more than you would think as we go through and program inside of PHP. So let's look at some more operators inside PHP. All right, so let's drop back into our presentation for a minute because now I want to look at some assignment operators inside of PHP. So I'm going to drop back into the presentation. And assignment operators in PHP. So assignment operators in PHP are used to assign values to variables in PHP. Now let's look at a chart that talks about some of the assignment operators that are available. First we have the equal sign, which assigns a value. Then we have the plus equal. And by the way, I've added spaces between these just for clarity. The space is normally not there in the programming. The plus equal adds and assigns a value, and we're going to demonstrate all of these. So if they confuse you, don't let it, because they're very easy. Once you start seeing how they work, very easy to understand. Then we have the subtract equal, which actually subtracts and then assigns. We have the multiply and assign, which is the multiply equal. Again, multiply and assigns. Then the divide and assign quotient, which is the divide equal. And then the modulus, which is divide and assign the modulus. So it's the modulus equal. is how that one works. And again, we're going to demonstrate each one of these, so don't let them confuse you. It sounds a little confusing when you're looking at the descriptions, but once you see them in action, it actually makes a lot of sense. So let's drop down into our development environment, and we'll go ahead and demonstrate these assignment operators in PHP. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drop out of my presentation and back into my development environment. I'm going to come down a couple of lines, and actually I'm going to open up a brand new PHP block and put in some break tags. So let's go ahead and drop a few lines. I'm going to put in a new operator, or sorry, a new heading inside my operators underscore 1.php file. So I'm going to come right down below where we did those other echoes. I'm going to put in a new heading, and I'm going to call these assignment operators. And again, this, if you have access to the exercise files, this way you'll be able to follow along, because we're going to keep this thing kind of broken down so you'll see all the different ones that we've done. And the first one we want to look at is that equal, or the assignment itself. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my PHP tags. Come down and close those PHP tags, and inside my PHP tags I want to actually make these assignments. And the first thing I want to do is right here, let's put in a couple of BR tags so we have a little bit of separation between the last exercise and this new exercise. So I'm going to say x, so let's give x equals to 10, and that's actually my assignment operator, the equal sign. So then if I echo 10, or if I echo x I should say, put in my colon, based on what we know our output should be 10. I don't know why I keep getting a capital U there. So let's go ahead and save those changes. And again, we're using the assignment operator, which is the equal sign. Refresh the browser window, and now we see 10, which makes good sense. The next one we talked about is the add and assign, which is the plus equal. So again, let's go ahead and assign a value of x. We'll make that one 20. So now I've got a variable x that's equal to 20. And then if I say x plus equal, so in other words, I'm using that add and assign operator, the plus equal, 30. What should my output be? So I'm going to say echo. Oops, and I forgot to put my x there. That's not going to work. So based on what we know about the assignment operator, add and assign, the plus equal, that should give me an output of 50. So if I ask what the value of x is, my output should be 50. I'm just putting these notes here for y'all. So let's go ahead and save that change, refresh our browser window, because now we're doing, remember, oops, didn't put my line break in. I should have put a break in there. In fact, let's do that right here. I'm going to put an echo, and we'll just copy this break with every one that we do. There we go. Save that change. Now, because we're using the assignment of plus equal, remember we're taking the value of x, we're adding it and assigning. So in other words, I'm taking the initial value of 20, I'm adding this to it, and then assigning that to the value. So now it's going to be 50. The next one we talked about in the presentation was subtract and assign. And subtract and assign should be pretty simple. And what we'll do is we'll just basically reverse what we've just done. So I'm going to take an echo. Let's put our break tag so we don't forget that dude this time. Keep our lines clean. And now I say I want to have x. So we want a variable of x. And let's make x 50. We'll make him what we left off with last time, because that's what he was when we left off last time. And now I'm going to say x again, but this time I want to do minus equal, because remember now we're doing the subtract and assign. And let's subtract and assign 20. So based on that, based on what we know from what we've learned, the value of x should be, if everything's working out as planned, it should be 30. Let me put my semicolon. So my output should be 30. Save the changes. Refresh my browser. Oops, syntax error. I forgot something. Oh, didn't assign it. I didn't put my equal sign. Save the changes. See, it caught me with a bug. And now we have 30, because now we did what we did was minus and assign, or subtract and assign. Same thing with our multiply and assign. So if we come down, let's do our line break again. So we've got our line breaks. Now we've got a nice clean line. The next thing we want to look at is multiply and assign. So let's take a couple of different values. Let's do our variable x, because I like using x, and we'll say this x is equal to 5. Then I come down and create my variable x again, and I say this x I want you to multiply and assign 25. So we know if we're going to multiply and assign 25 to a value of 5, that means our output should be 125. So we're going to say echo. We want to echo x. And again, based on what we know from what we've already worked through, the output should be 125. 5 times 25. Let's go ahead and save those changes. Refresh our browser window. 125, because now we're multiplying and assigning at the same time. Another one we looked at was divide and assign. So let's come down. We'll actually look at divide and assign. And let's take a value of x. We'll say x is equal to 50. And that with the semicolon, and again, value of x. And this time x is equal to, let's see, divide and assign. Let's make it 10. So I want to divide and assign 10 to x. And if I echo x, and actually I forgot to put my line break. Let's go ahead and copy this. Come down one line. There we go. And now if I echo x, I'm going to go ahead and copy this so we don't have to keep watching me type. And this value should be 5. Because again, we're dividing by 10 and then assigning it to that new value of x. So if we save it, refresh our browser window, and we've got 5. And then the last one we looked at was the modulus. And a modulus, again, like I said in the earlier exercise, that's probably the most difficult of all of these, because it's one that we haven't really used until we got into programming. So I'm putting my line break. I'm going to get a value of x is 100. And I want to add a modulus equal to this one. So I'm going to pull out that divide, put in my modulus equal. And let's go with 15, because we know we can't get 15 equally into 100. And if I echo x, my output should be 10. I should have 10 left over when I divide 100 by 15. So let's go ahead and echo that, save all our changes, refresh our browser window, and we've got 10 left over. If I were to change this and divide it by 12, save as or save all, again, now we got 4 left over. Again, and it's the remainder from whatever the value we're dividing into. We're assigning that value to the new value of x. So again, assignment operators, not really difficult, but you need to understand, and we do use these a lot, by the way. We use them a lot in our programming. You'll see that as we work through more and more programming inside of PHP. So I think I'm going to break this tutorial. It's got a little bit long. In the next part of our PHP operators, we're going to look at comparison operators in PHP. So I look forward to seeing you in that tutorial.